The lighting here is a bit strange in this new room because I have a little gap in the trees, a nice garden here, but there is reflected sunlight coming from the opposite building on me, so I hope that's not too distracting. Anyways, so here we are continuing with the idea of resistance to knowledge and change. We have been talking about how we ignore evidence even when it's very convincing and direct, whereas we may hold on to beliefs even when they are based on very erroneous information or evidence, empirical evidence. So another aspect of Gluer and Wilkforce approach to knowledge resistance concerns irrationality. It is important to bear in mind that they refer to a particular form of irrationality in relation to how evidence is ignored or interpreted. Looking at photos from the inaugurations of President Obama and Trump and still claiming that the latter had more people attending is indeed irrational, since it's simply not a plausible interpretation of the empirical evidence. This came about from actually the debate where the Park Service, which offers the approximate number of people that attended, you can see this ant colonies here during the inauguration of Obama, which had raised a lot of hopes and maybe in the end didn't yield results as expected, but nonetheless you can see with Trump's attendance, same exact shot by the Park Services shows that mostly it's all empty along the way, but that didn't stop somebody like Trump from claiming. And Trump is unique because even if he's on video saying something, he will say that he never said it, and apparently it also works for some people, and that's belief, ignorance, irrational behavior all combined into one. However, while such irrationality is fundamental for knowledge resistance, it's essential to note that resisting knowledge can be rational for a resistor valuing membership and status in a social group over validity of a particular knowledge claim regardless of its overwhelming evidence. So we'll see this more later, but people who want Trump in power for whatever reason go along with his claims, even as irrational as they may seem to most of the people, right? Resistance to change was already elaborated on more than 500 years ago by Machiavelli, who writes, and it ought to be remembered that there is nothing more difficult to take in hand, more perilous to conduct, or more uncertain in its success than to take the lead in the introduction of a new order of things, because the innovator has for all enemies all those let me read that again. I stressed. And it ought to be remembered that there is nothing more difficult to take in hand, more perilous to conduct, or more uncertain in its success than to take the lead in the introduction of a new order of things, because the innovator has for enemies all those who have done well under the old conditions, and lukewarm defenders in those who may do well under the new. So there are people who want status quo because they are the winners in their situation. So they'll be your enemies if you want to innovate a change, and there will be lukewarm defenders of from those who may do well in your new innovation of a new reality. Our tendency to learn by focusing on short-term feedback is not only undermining compliance to immediate precautionary measures such as evacuation, it's also undermining our willingness to invest in proactive measures to reduce risk more generally. If you go tell people to move away from the coasts because sea level rise is going to wash out their homes, then the developers may say, we have information that this is not true, or people might say, well, if it's happening in 50 years, then I don't care. They just think it's not certain enough to make them move. The more effective prevention measures are, the more infrequent the events become. That is the entire logic of prevention. The more effective prevention measures are, the more infrequent the events become. It's like a not Moore's law, the Murphy's law, right? Similarly, the more effective mitigation measures are, the less consequences the events cause when finally occurring, just as intended. However, when people do not experience any events, or at least not any severe consequences, the sensory biases and availability of heuristics combine and cause us to increasingly underestimate the risk of the events, and thus erode our perceived need for proactive risk reduction measures in the first place. This unfortunate pattern could be called the tragedy of the risk reduction and requires purposeful action to counter. So we have the tragedy of the commons, which is a sustainability problem, but here we are coining tragedy of the risk reduction in this way. The tragedy of the risk reduction as a balancing feedback loop in which successful risk reduction leads to reduced risk reduction. What do we mean? So let's say we have experienced some consequences which has a positive impact on us to pay to reduce the potential consequences from happening again, or the risk reduction. So you do investment in risk reduction and risk is actually reduced, but then the experienced consequences go down. Let's say the best example I can think of is there were terrorist attacks on 9/11, I think in 2001, where planes crashed into the Twin Towers and they collapsed, and there were two other crashes, one in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania, the other one into the Pentagon. Now imagine that there were all the risk reduction measures in place to prevent the terrorists from doing this, and you got the terrorists and they said this was their plan, and you explain to people that this is what would have happened. Would they believe it? You know, now that it has happened, if you say we prevented another major attack, they may believe it because they have experienced it, but those who haven't experienced it may say this sounds too fantastical. So this is a tricky thing to do, that risk reduction investments may actually reduce risk and reduce negative experiences, then the willingness to pay may continue to decline. So it's kind of a strange situation. Should I read this? It seems like a long thing, but let's start anyway. Taking risk. Human beings are hardwired to take risks. All farmers, everybody does this, we all do it. Any unwillingness to invest in risk reduction can be connected to a discounting effect that makes human beings prefer immediate over the long-term rewards. So how much we invest now for the future depends on how we discount the value of money. If you invest something, if you have to invest $1,000 today, that will have a gain of, let's say, $100 in 5 years, then you might say I will not do it. It can be the other way also. If somebody says I'll give you $5,000 in 5 years versus $100 today, you might just take $100 today. More specifically, it's a tendency to discount the value of uncertain future benefits of proactive measures compared to the certain immediate costs of implementing them. And we often also imagine that the future generations will do better than us and will take care of themselves anyway. For example, if we know for sure that it would cost 1 million to reduce the risk of particular potential events that may happen and could cost 1 billion if it occurred, we are psychologically predisposed not to make the investment, even if the estimated probability of occurrence would make it good investment now. Just like when Nicholas Stern, the former chief economist of the World Bank, presented the landmark study called the Stern Review in 2006, clearly showing the immense economic benefits of immediate action in response to climate change. Yet nothing happened. So we keep on getting these reports on what investment we have to make today for, let's say, the prevention of diseases or reducing greenhouse gases and so on, and what the economic benefits would be. We would still not invest in it, and we continue this way. The reluctance to invest is often motivated under the guise of waiting for more certainty in how likely the events are and what the consequences would actually be. Just like decision makers did not did concerning the Stern review. Basically ignored it. However, such procrastination is based on the fallacy that time will provide certainty, and in this case that's not necessarily true, at least not in the complex systems of interest that we are looking at here, the sustainability challenge. We may learn more about the systems we are interested in, but proactive thinking and action are, by definition, liable to uncertainty regardless of how long we wait. So waiting may continue to increase the risk, and uncertainty may not go down. It's also worth noting that Nicholas Stern has admitted several times that he was wrong about climate change back in 2006, that it is much worse. It means it is even easier to show that proactive investments are good investments in purely economic terms. However, most people do nothing to change their unsustainable lifestyles to contribute to the solution to our sustainability challenges, in the hope that things will not be that bad after all. So this is what we think about discounting effect in a nutshell. What if we don't change anything at all? Perhaps something magical will just happen. So that is magical thinking, but also there is opportunity cost. Let's say I'm wanting to go to a nice tropical island while it's hot here, so maybe a nice mountain, and I have to fly, and I don't take the travel because I want to save the emissions, but nothing happens in my lifetime. That's an opportunity cost for me, right? Somebody else may benefit, but I lost my opportunity to travel to the nice mountain. So let's leave this here and come back and continue on how we discount the future and so on. Okay, so this is part 3. I'm adjusting the camera in real time on changing the world and understanding resistance to change and knowledge. Okay, see you in the next podcast.